7, the first arc, I would dare say the legendary opening arc of Ultimate Spider-Man. I've confessed to Hayden before. This is the first time I have read it. I'll be interested if this is your first experience or if it's something that you go back to regularly. Um, so, and Carter and I had a chance. I read this digitally on Marvel Unlimited. Carter mentioned that he read it digitally as well. Electrix, do you have this physically or digital consumer for this?
I don't have it at all. I used to listen to, before I joined the Comic Pals and had found Comic Pop, I was listening to Comic Book Herald's podcast, and they have My Marvelous Year as a reading book club, and I just listened to them, and I back in the day, and looked up various panels that they were talking about for the various issues. So I've done a book club without having it at all, and I cannot read digital, and I haven't bought it.
Gotcha. Okay.
So
All
I'm
right. Well,
just gonna listen to guys talk about the book.
Yeah. Cool. Love it. Let's see here. So I'm going to keep track.
I also listen to Comic Pop. They have done a lot of the various Ultimate Spider-Man arcs.
Yeah. Sal does a great job with back issues and things like that are really good. Let's see. Okay, so I just went ahead and culled some questions off of a website to kind of frame up the conversation. And so what we'll do is, I'm going to I'll put a question out there. If you want to reply, and we got a couple more people joining us, so I think the best thing to do is if you want to reply in voice, throw up a hand in the chat, and then I can, I'll do my best to call on you. And then if you want to put something in the chat to be read instead, that's perfectly fine as well. I'll keep track of those comments as well. Hayden, if you could help me out with that as well. If there's something there, just nudge me or something. And then I have to, unfortunately, I've had a personal thing come up. I've got to drop at 10 o'clock Eastern time for a function. So Hayden is going to close it up, and we will be done in time for the PAL stream that starts at 10:15 Eastern. Okay, so that's kind of where we're at. Sorry about that. I did not know about that until last minute, but life and has trumped comics this morning. So, all right. So, as far as this, as far as Ultimate Spider-Man, the inevitable question is, how do you think when you read this and compare it to, say, the Sam Raimi movie with Tobey Maguire and the obvious comparison to Amazing Fantasy 15, where does this stack up for you? And what comparisons or contrasts would you make with those other versions of the origin? Hayden, take it away, buddy.
So it's interesting because during the series publication, Sam Raimi was working on the first Spider-Man movie. And I clarified earlier before we had officially started that I didn't get a chance to reread Ultimate Spider-Man, but I have read it before. And somewhere in the series, we actually see Peter meet Tobey Maguire, and he's like, "You look nothing like me." And it's a very fun moment. But I found it to be very compelling because the pals had talked about it during the first deep dive episode where Stan had wished that he could have stretched out the origin a bit more to really go in depth with the characters and themes. And Brian Michael Bendis did that really well for this first arc. I mean, you don't see a lot of Spider-Man in this. It's mainly Peter being Peter, which I found to be really compelling. So I think it's done really well. I think it's like a perfect example of really good decompressed storytelling, which Bendis really put into motion with his first arc.
Yep. Okay, thanks, Hayden. Amin.
Hey, what's up, guys? Um, so for me, I probably think that this is my favorite origin like we've ever seen of Spider-Man. I think it's better than the mainline 616 Spider-Man origin, and it's like as Hayden said, it's just a little bit long. It's a little bit like longer in terms of how many issues it takes, and I think it fleshes out a lot of the elements. And like Atomic said, like you can see a lot of elements of this origin in the live action movies, like especially like for example, like Harry and Mary Jane being like high school friends to Peter. That's straight up from this. Like it doesn't happen in 616. And another element that I think it is a little bit, I think it's better is the idea of the genetic spider. I think it works better when it's a genetic mutation instead of just being like a radioactive Spider-Man. Like I don't know what is that supposed to mean. Like that's those are the kind of elements that I really enjoy from this book. But like Hayden said, I think the small moments in this book, like the reflection, the conversations between Peter and Uncle Ben and Aunt May are so good that it's just incredible. Like this is Bendis at its peak, and it's so good.
Yeah. Yep. Thanks for that, Amin. Yeah, the wild fluctuations in plot and how things progress and everything is makes it a quick read and also makes it a compelling one. Viltrum, welcome.
Hey, a little bit like Hayden, I couldn't reread it. I didn't know we were gonna be discussing this today. I thought we were gonna discuss it on Monday, but I absolutely have to get on board to talk about Ultimate Spider-Man and Ultimate Comics in general because this was my comics growing up. And I mean, it's weird. I always kind of had this weird relationship with Ultimate Spider-Man because I was always wanted to know what was happening, but I thought I was hate reading. But then I just realized, no, you're not hate reading. uh, but in terms of the origin and just getting into it, I'm gonna be, I think, a bit more wonderfully kindly mixed. Of on the one hand, it is truly amazing, and when we get into Ultimate X-Men next week, of just it's so stunning the difference of just how it takes, I forget, 5 or 6 issues till we get Peter Parker really in the Spider-Man outfit. And yet, in the very first issue of Ultimate X-Men, they are the X-Men. So just think about that and think about the difference of how Mark Miller approaches this compared to how Brian Michael Bendis approaches this. And so how much we care about Peter Parker and get into Peter Parker is fascinating. The one thing I'll say that's a bit of a weakness, or it's just the one thing that is fascinating to compare. Ooh, nice, all of them. But the one thing that I'd say, and maybe to spin the pot a little bit and get what everyone thinks, is that unfortunately the big thing that everyone, it's an infamous term, but is likability. And they really want to make you like Peter Parker so much so that every time I read Ultimate Spider-Man, even as a kid, I must admit this, when I read this trade, and I read this in trade for the first time, so it's really hard for me to picture reading this in single issues. Bendis does not lend to single issue reading. When I read the first Miles Morales Spider-Man issue, it was just like, this is a ripoff. This took me 8 minutes to read. This is a ripoff. So, and I also will say that if you were ever privy to, oh gosh, he just passed away. Why am I blanking on his name? Legendary editor in chief of Marvel, but
Jim Shooter.
Yeah, shooters panels. He was not kind to Bendis at all. He was not. But anyways, what I was getting at, and to stir the pot, sorry for being so long-winded, but is this. I think Amazing Spider-Man 15 still is probably the premiere for the origin of Spider-Man because it's willing to go places that no retelling of Spider-Man has truly been able to will themselves to be. Is that Peter Parker, once he gains the superpowers, becomes a jerk. Of that, he was a picked on, bullied kid, and then he just becomes a selfish brat. And how when the thief comes, just Spider-Man, just it's so believable that he's just like, I don't care. What's that got to do with me? And they always try to make it a bit more likable. I understand how they're able to get it to work in the Sam Raimi movie. I think that's better than it just feels so random. I feel in Ultimate Spider-Man where just suddenly Peter Parker is like, "What? No, it's not my problem." It's like, "What?" I mean, Peter, you're wrestling to help pay the hospital bills for your aunt and uncle. Why are you suddenly so apathetic to there's a thief, stop him? So that's the one major weakness I think that Bendis, in trying to make Peter Parker likable, the thief bit and just the great power, great responsibility bit, I feel comes out of nowhere. Of just, huh? Why? Why, Peter? Why didn't you stop him? I don't see that with his character in this version.
Yeah, interesting. And thanks for joining us and sharing that perspective. You know, it's especially comics if they're like in our youth or whatever, the impact that they have. I know it certainly did on mine. And it sounds like that's similar for you with Ultimate Spider-Man. Yeah. Interesting. We're going to have some more character questions coming up, so I'll be interested. And oh, by the way, if so, we are going to do an encore discussion of Ultimate Spider-Man on Monday. So sorry if I confused anybody with the multiple communications there, but we are going to do both. For Sean asked for like a over-the-top response and support for Ultimate August, so we're going to ramp up community book clubs here. But really glad you were able to join us, Viltrum. Let's see. Let's move on to Carter.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, this is my first time reading it as well, because when this came out, I was 2 years old, so it's a little old for me. But I would say I really enjoyed the origin compared to a lot of the movies and things like that. I've never gone back and read like the original origin or any retellings really of it until this point. And I really kind of struggle when the pals talk about like the whole decompressed storytelling stuff. But reading this, I finally like really understood what that meant and like how that could sort of affect the story progression. So I really enjoyed that. Helped me learn a good bit, and I'll be thinking about that a little bit more as I read more Bendis stuff and going onward. But yeah, I think it's pretty solid. I do kind of disagree with I think what Viltrum said a little bit. I felt like Peter felt more human than a lot of interpretations of Peter that I've seen at least, which, like I said, to be fair, is mostly just movie stuff. Because a 15-year-old high schooler is very wishy-washy, and their mind can change on a dime about pretty much anything, especially going through major life changes like that. So to me, it felt pretty natural for him to one day be a loser, next be on top of the world, and then, be like, well, my problems are more important than anyone else's. So of course I don't need to stop this thief. Really, I've got my own stuff to deal with. And so yeah, to me it just felt more natural, and I liked it a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Carter. Appreciate that. Emily the goalie says, genetic versus radioactive is just a way to update it. The heroes of the 60s are all born of the age of nuclear radiation. Yeah, agree. And I wonder, including me, by the way, it would be from the era that of my origin, deeply rooted in nuclear radiation as well. And I wonder if at some point in, say another 20 years or whatever, if it's going to be the role of AI in developing of additional powers and things like that. Let's see here. Neon Knight is here. Morning, all. Just listening as I wait in line to get into a con. Thank you. Emily
Hey,
says,
morning all. It's a little loud, so I didn't want to kind of things.
"Oh, no problem." Emily says this Peter is very angsty. Ray's hanging out. Thank you. And we have Rami, Ted Wong, and at Steve Swarm Canaris. All right, everybody, welcome. I'm going to go on to another question here. And we've talked a little bit about Peter as a character and everything, some of the contrast to the different origins of Spider-Man. But if there was a character in the story, it could be anybody. Who would you like to meet? Who would you like to hang out with? And what do you think that conversation would be like? What would you ask them? And again, if you want to respond to that verbally, throw up a hand in the chat, and I'll be glad to call on you. Who in the story would you like to meet, and what would you ask them? Or who would you like to hang out with? Steve's typing. Steve says Norman Osborn, and I'd asked him to pay for lunch. By the way, Steve, I really enjoyed the goat cheesecake meme last night. That was very funny. Ted is typing. Hayden is typing. Hayden, go ahead. Who would you, out of the story, who would you like to hang out with, and what would you ask him?
So I'd want to ask Peter his thought process of his like powers and how he plans to use them before and after the death of Uncle Ben, to see like that change within him, to see him go from wanting to use his powers from a more selfish point of view to a more selfless point of view, and see how Uncle Ben's death has really changed him. Of course, we see that throughout the story of Ultimate Spider-Man. I just think it'd be interesting to pick the brain of the actual character and see what he thinks, not what the author is saying through him.
Okay. Thanks for that, Hayden. Any other takers? If not, we can certainly move. We'll certainly move on. Let's see here. Okay. So let's move over to the actual creator then. If you could talk to Bendis about this story, or could ask him questions about the story, what would you ask Brian Michael Bendis as the writer? And we are going to do Mark Bagley as well after this. So, but in terms of Bendis and his role in this, what's of interest, or what would you ask? Viltrum, take it away.
Okay. Well, I love behind the scenes making ofs, and we are overdue for the untold story Marvel Comics: The Untold Story, true tea spilling of just the Ultimate line is the most fascinating thing that the fanboys were so panicky about when it was first announced because they thought like, are you about to? I think where credit is due, the very infamous figure of, oh gosh, now I'm blanking on his name, but the infamous publisher of Marvel Comics who came in and I mean like Joe Quesada is a polarizing figure, but he's not as polarizing as Jemis, that's his name, yeah.
Gemis, yeah.
Bill Jemis. And so when Bill Jemis came in, he was immediately like, okay, how are you in almost chapter 11? This doesn't make sense. And that point, he was right. And he came in as an outsider. So sometimes he was pretty spot on of like, okay, we need to make this look more glossy, interesting. So I like what um, I like what Quesada's doing, so I'm making him editor in chief, and I want you to do what Marvel Knights for the whole Marvel, and I also want you to reboot Marvel entirely. But he wasn't on the full length of no, I'm not going to New 52 Marvel, but there will be a kind of New 52 for Marvel of one line that will be safe for new readers. And there's so many stories about how much Bill Jemis is either like, well, he was an interesting guy in that level of Jim Shooter, or even more than Shooter, though. Just the collective wisdom is like, yeah, he went nuts and he was a jerk. Just Grant Morrison is not shy at all about saying how much he hated Bill Jemis's guts. Or no, they hated Bill Jemis's guts. And I just wonder. So Ultimate Spider-Man, along with much of the Ultimate Marvel, was Bill Jemis's idea and pitch, and just Quesada had to go along with it. And so hiring Bendis itself was kind of on the level of, all right, I want a new talent, someone who hasn't worked in Marvel before and is going to come into this new, completely new, different. Do not think like a fanboy. Come to me with something different. So because of that and that direction and that kind of mandate, how much was it that some of the directions and some of the angles were, no, I want you to do it this way, and how much was like, okay, all right, I actually get the picture. How would I just take the raw concept of Spider-Man and do something different? So that's what I would really want to get in Bendis's head of just how much it was like, okay, did you really want to abandon the glider for the Green Goblin, and did you want to just make him this kind of Hulk thing, or is that Jemis?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Long-winded way to ask that, but just how much of this is you and how much of this is Jemis? That's what I have to ask.
You know, and I found it interesting. So this is my first time actually sitting down and reading it. That Jemis was credited in this as one of the creators for the story. I did not recognize that before this, so I'd be that's a really good line of questioning for either one of those individuals about who contributed what and and who had kind of the final sign off on it. I would assume it was somebody in management at Marvel for how they were for the in particular like the Goblin about how that was going to be revealed.
I mean, okay, sorry, I'm gonna say one last thing. Now that I'm saying this out loud, I am thinking like, oh, this sounds a little bit like Lee Kirby Ditko debate of just like, okay, what part is you? What part is Lee? What part is Kirby? What part is Ditko? Da 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 da. It's like, oh, I don't know. It's been so long, but I do think they can be a bit more forthcoming than Lee, Kirby, or Ditko because they're all not with us anymore, and it's all just they almost never wrote this down, so it's kind of impossible to prove one way or the other. Whereas I think there is a paper trail.
Yeah, and certainly, yeah, in the digital age, there's much more YouTube content and things like that, yeah, that's available. Steve, a question for Mr. Bendis. How much studying of the Lee Ditko comics did you do? That would be interesting to ask. Ray mentions Jimis. Neon Knight has a question for Nick Fury. Is it worth it? Manipulating for the greater good, does it really pay off, or is it creating more problems for society? Yeah, there's a few people I'd like to ask that question for in real life. Let's see. And Viltrum says save that for the Ultimates debate. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so let's switch over to the art. And Mark Bagley, obviously the artist here. Art Thiebert, I think, did some of the inks as well. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Hayden. Some unique layouts here. We'll see you later, Neon Knight. So thoughts on the art, whether that's the layouts, the figures, the panels, and everything. How did this work for you? Again, feel free to throw up a hand in the chat if you want to do that. Let's see here. Oh, Viltrum, go ahead. Go ahead.
I know I'm long-winded and I can dominate a conversation. I'm truly sorry, but if no one else wants to say anything, fine. Then I'll just keep on yammering until I annoy you all too much. Well, hey, let's be honest. I think that Bagley is there with someone as perfect as Steve Dillon and John Romita Sr. And Junior, for that matter, of just like, this is pure storytelling. This is absolutely pure storytelling. Of that, this just, you can give this to anyone and anyone can read. And it's always been more like, I understand the awesome art of plenty of artists that attracts people's attentions and is really dynamic and interesting. But sometimes, and the point of comics, I always feel, is ultimately just to tell a story. And art that almost calls attention to itself sometimes detracts from just focusing on the story. And so, just pure classic storytelling art that lets you just focus in on the story and focus in on the characters is perfect. And so Bagley basically never really hits a wrong beat. Not really. Not for me. And for all of his 100+ issue run, I mean, the only thing that's interesting is just how this is inked and how quickly the art will evolve, but also just the power of inks will be for this. Just where he will be at for his final arc with the Ultimate Knights. Just how kind of just flawless his art is. It's just amazing. Yeah. That's all I can say about that. It's just like, I can't really say a negative word about Bagley's art. It's just solid meat and potatoes, great comics art, that what great comics art should be.
Yeah, center of the fairway art. I really did like some of the use of the double pages. It was obvious even in digital, right? When you turn the page and everything, and then how he had the panels arranged. That struck me, as well as the change in the facial expressions, and that was something that Ditko and Romita and some others in the classic original Spider-Man, even if it was, even though he's got the full face mask and everything, you knew when he was surprised and things like that. And Bagley certainly carried on that tradition as well. Emily.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that again, like just speak the praises of the great Mark Bagley. He is without a doubt one of the best Spider-Man artists of all time. He had a lot of experience working with David Michelinie during the '90s, so he had a he had a lot of he knew how to draw Spider-Man for a long time. Now you bring it into this new universe. How do you change it? You make Peter this teenager. He's lean. He's very lean. He's very skinny. It almost looks the costume almost looks too tight on him. And it's just everything about this art is perfect, in my opinion. Although I will say though, he does get better about drawing Aunt May as more of a 50-something rather than a decrepit old lady.
Yeah. Um, one of the things as you and Viltrum were talking about that reminded me as I was going through this over the last couple of nights, the use of motion in action, right, where you got kind of like the sketch of the character, right, and it shows you the movement from spot to spot and everything. Reminded me a lot of what Scott McDaniel did with Nightwing in over at DC Comics, and these are two of the very best examples I've ever seen of that between those two, between Bagley and Scott McDaniel. Let me see here. Hayden, thanks. Inks are by Art Thieber and Dan Panosian. Oh, some young Dan Panosian. Colors by Steve Buccellato and Marie Javins. And letters are by Richard Starking. Thanks for that. Amin says, how do you feel about Peter's hair? Thanks for that. Ray says, Bagley showed he had the chops back on Thunderbolts. Yeah, good point, Ray. He had his first work with Marvel. I think it was Thunderbolts, but yeah, showed he could be a top line artist there as well. Carter says, seems it may be a hot take, but the art is just okay. It definitely screams 2000s to me, but I don't really care for it much. Okay, well, that's certainly a legitimate critique of it. Electrix has got his hand up. Please take it away, Electrix.
Oh yeah, one reason because for skipping collecting these in the beginning when I started reading comics again as an adult is that when I was young, you had like Todd McFarlane and what's his name, Eric Larson, and then they disappeared, and the art became Bagley, and that was a very big shift for me, a shift backwards, but also towards I was growing up, and that felt like I might have enjoyed it as a 10-year-old rather than 14-year-old as I was back then, or 15 maybe. So it just didn't speak to me, and I have come around to it after picking up Chip Zdarsky's life story, Spider-Man life story. That was great, and I found a new appreciation for Bagley's art, and I also love Thunderbolts, but I can see it when I read it that why I wouldn't have enjoyed it back in the day, his art. So I didn't really think about it as really great when I just look at the books. There was a reason for holding out on reading Ultimate Spider-Man by Bendis and Bagley. initially.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks for
but
that.
I'm sure I'm gonna enjoy it if I pick it up now. I have a new appreciation for his art.
Yep. Thanks for that, Electrics. Appreciate that. A couple of people, including Steve and Robbie, mentioned New Warriors for Mark Bagley. Yep. I forgot about that. And yes, Emily, you are correct. He also worked with David Michelinie on later 90s Spider-Man and early Venom. Yep. Hayden mentions also in a similar boat. I like it, but Bagley isn't my favorite Spider-Man artist. Spider-Man's had a lot of great artists, that's for sure. Um, Ditko, Romita, Gil Kane, and many others. Romita Jr. Certainly did and continues to contribute to the lore of Spider-Man. So he's had just a number of.
As well.
What was that, Letrix?
Mike Zeck.
Mike Zeck. Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
And well, of course, Todd McFarlane sort of revolutionized the character in the late '80s with some of his layouts and things like that. Let me see here. Steve says, I feel that art is grounded in the 2000s rather than being timeless. Not a criticism. I think it resonated with the audience, but maybe not holding up. So that's a question for you. So talk a little bit about the art and everything. Does the story hold up? So it's 25 years old. So it's if the car would be an antique. Does the story hold up for you? Got a couple people typing here. Steve says, I think the introspection of Peter is classic Spider-Man. Yeah, kind of that he does have that brooding sense about him, especially in his Peter identity. But then once he really gets into the Spider-Man role in issues, especially 7, that kind of madcap fun about him really jumps out in everything. Izzy's joined us. Hey, Izzy. Captions instead of thought balloons, but same thing with Steve. Viltrum's got his hand up. Take it away, Viltrum.
That's a fair question to ask in terms of dated, and I always think that I don't quite understand whenever I hear art is dated. I understand when they say writing is dated of just that thought balloons, they wouldn't exactly do it this way. Of so many thought balloons, they would use narration captions or something like that, or just how the story is written. I can more understand and get behind the idea that it's dated in some way, but if a good story is a good story, it holds up. And I think that the origin story is always a bit tricky, and so it's always a bit, I think, stifling in some ways, as things like the new Superman and Fantastic Four movie have kind of proven, of just like, we're kind of sick of it. We don't want to learn too much of how you got the superpowers. Can we just get to the fun part of you being a superhero?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it does hold up, but Ultimate Spider-Man goes on much better places once this arc is over. Of just the Kingpin arc, just right after this, is just so much fun and so much more where you get what Bendis wants to do with Spider-Man. Of just, to mildly spoil it, but also preview and encourage people to read it. Just his final confrontation with the Kingpin, of just
Yeah.
it is a delight to read. I'm just
Hey,
worried
Viltrum,
for the Kingpin.
Viltrum, a question for you. At what point do you think they knew they had a hit? You know, go ahead.
Well, that's a great question. From the publisher standpoint, they knew that it was a hit when it was already 3 issues in and they still hadn't shown Spider-Man except on the cover, and it was selling better than Amazing Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, what? Like, you got to be kidding me. Like, where's Spider-Man? And like I said, again, with like something like Ultimate X-Men, it makes much more sense. No, you got to immediately get them in the costumes and get them doing superhero stuff. So
Yeah.
like, what is this like decompressed, like just character oriented? Like, what is this? Like you're writing a teen drama book. What is this? Where's the superhero stuff?
Yeah.
I would say where they really knew they had a hit is I think it's 12.
Okay.
When all the issue is Peter Parker revealing his identity to Mary Jane, and that's all that happens for that entire issue.
Sure. Sure.
And that's like, it's one of the best issues of the comic.
Yeah.
And
You know, and what I find is that you can tell when series kind of find that footing where they have confidence and everything, right? And so I look for that in these classic stories where something that they maybe didn't think was going to stick with the audience, but then all of a sudden they realize it does, and that really opens up the window for them. So.
absolutely.
I got to drop, folks. Hayden is going to take you home the rest of the way. I got to run and take care of a personal item, but Hayden will take good care of you and up until the pals are go at a quarter after the hour, and hopefully I will be able to join that in progress shortly. All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. It looks like I'm the captain now. Catching up on some of the comments that y'all have put in the chat, Rami says, I want to ask Mark Bagley how difficult it was to shift his art and the character designs from the main universe to fit the ultimate one. That would certainly be an interesting question. A lot of the times before these publishers come out with these big line-wide events, we'll see like a lot of preliminary art that artists have made. I know before the New 52 started, Jim Lee had done a lot of artwork for the different characters. Whenever I read the early volumes of Green Arrow, you actually see the Jim Lee design of what Green Arrow might look like for the New 52. So that would definitely be an interesting question. Emily's response to whether this story holds up, they say, in my opinion, it does and it doesn't. The story beats do, but there's certain dialogue choices that aged faster than milk, i.e., ubiquitous use of ableist slur. Yeah, I mean, it's very of its time. You can definitely tell that, and it was very early 2000s. I'll just say that you can definitely feel that. And whenever Carter had mentioned the artwork, how it felt very of its time, I would say, like, whenever I think of early 2000s comics, like, that's the artwork that I think of. I don't think it's like aged too poorly, but like I said, Mark Bagley is not my favorite Spider-Man artist. Carter said, I think it holds up pretty well, other than some dialogue. Absolutely. I like that there are other high schoolers, that the other high schoolers aren't just one-note bullies, like the big guy turns friendly to Peter. Emily also said, writing will always inevitably be a product of its era. Certain terms will fall out of favor and styles of writing will become antiquated as we progress and mature. The new generation of writers will always take inspiration from older works, but filter them through a different light. Absolutely. Like, there is some bad dialogue during Spider-Man, but that does not make the entire book bad. Like, Ultimate Spider-Man has a lot of hidden gems among the series. One of my favorite stories is in volume 18 of Ultimate Spider-Man. This is the Ultimate Marvel Knights story. I will not spoil it for anyone who has not read it, but basically Spider-Man joins a team of street-level heroes, and then someone betrays the group, and they're trying to figure out who the traitor is. That's the basic premise of this. And I find this story really compelling, at least for me, especially with the characters that do appear in it. You can probably see on the cover. You've got Doctor Strange, Moon Knight, Shang-Chi, Daredevil, Iron Fist, and of course Spider-Man. But yeah, there are certainly gems among the Ultimate Spider-Man line. Viltrum Warrior says there was a ton of Ultimate comics that dropped the R word. Lionel Bagley drawn art. That is a phenomenal story. I'm glad that you agree. Emily said, I know it's a word of its era. Shame that it's coming back into fashion. Yeah, absolutely. Let me scroll up to Hound's questions to continue this conversation. Let's see what else they write. I guess we can tackle this one because we are getting close to the time of the actual show starting. First, the pals start at, it'll be 9:15 my time, and we're at 9:03. So I'm just going to ask the last question of it, which is, what did you think of the ending? Was it predictable or surprising? Was everything wrapped up, or was the ending ambiguous? Again, I have not been able to reread Ultimate Spider-Man for this discussion, but I actually read, whenever I initially read the first volume, I read it in the Ultimate Spider-Man collection, which collects the first 2 volumes of Ultimate Spider-Man. So I never really felt that disconnect because it goes straight into the Kingpin stuff from the second volume. So I never really felt the ending, so to speak. I think I got a more satisfactory ending by reading both of those volumes in one go. So the ending didn't affect my enjoyment of the book. Go ahead and take the floor, Viltrum.
I don't feel there's any ambiguity, really. I mean, it's obvious that it's Norman Osborn, and it's obvious that like Harry's speaking the truth. I would be interested what people feel about this presentation of the Green Goblin and what they feel about it. I never quite love the Bendis's take on Green Goblin in comparison to what he does with Dr. Octopus or the Kingpin. And even Venom. Of just like those takes I much more enjoy and much more appreciate. The take they do with Green Goblin always felt a little bit strange to me. I kind of want to, not to be mean, but stir the pot and drift away. And I think this question would more interest everyone and get their thoughts. But Ultimate Spider-Man, to mildly spoil, but they do hint at this in the first issue, and it gets more developed as it goes on, especially with the great Ultimate Six arc. But it's ultimately how, pun intended, in kind of an MCU type of preview, and how do you feel about this? But the presentation, it all ties back to Captain America, and it all ties back to the super soldier serum and how Spider-Man is ultimately the product of them trying to replicate Captain America super soldier. So how do you feel about that reinterpretation and that everything ties back into the Marvel universe? And just mildly hint at some things if you guys want to, anyone wants to eventually read it. Eventually, Bendis makes it absolutely clear how vital Captain America is to the Marvel universe, and how it even ties to the X-Men. So, but how do we feel about that idea of just, and this preview for the MCU of just it all ties back to Captain America and it's all tied together of this way of just we keep on trying to replicate the super soldier serum and we get all these, at best we get Spider-Man, at worst we get the Green Goblin.
I like it because it makes sense that as soon as you have a super soldier, it becomes an arms race immediately. Like every country would want their own super soldier to, if need be, go up against Captain America. And I think it would also be very fitting that billion-dollar companies would try to seek the profits within making these super soldier serums, whether that is a goblin serum or so on and so forth. And so I do think that tying it to Captain America would make sense, at least from my perspective. Amin said, there's not a single villain in Ultimate that I like more than their 616 counterpart, sadly. I think for me, I do like the design of Electro a bit more. I do prefer the like full-on electricity look over the green and yellow suit, especially this is the Ultimate 6 cover. I don't know, I just like the pure energy look of Electro. And I might be a bit biased because about the same time that I was getting into comics, there was the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, and in that one they used the living electricity look for Electro. But I think that would be the only villain that I like more than their 616 counterpart. Amin is typing away. Yeah, I thought the ending was fine for what it is.
To piggyback off of what you're saying, since I think everyone just wants to type, I guess, right now. So sorry, dominating the conversation. I genuinely am sorry. But what you were said earlier, and that's something I love about the Ultimate line, that at least when it's great with Miller and Bendis of that they really get, is that whole idea of what you just said, that's the theme of I tie back to it because it's a great storyline, but Ultimate 6, but it's also the whole theme of the Ultimates and especially Ultimates 2, hintity hint hint, of just how much it's just all these other countries are just like, of course they want to get in on this superhero action. Of course they want their own super soldiers. Of course. And 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 just how Spider-Man, like the great line later on, to mildly spoil things, but in the second clone, no, not clone saga, in the second symbiote saga, is that just Peter Parker's says to Nick Fury, is like, my dad was trying to cure cancer. It's like, yeah, I know he did, but he's made a super weapon, and I'm sorry, kid, but everyone wants a super weapon, and I'm sorry, but your father might have started a damn world war. Just hilarious, but also just like how all these well-meaning scientists and well-intentions can just be immediately misconstrued. And yeah, Oppenheimer, Parker, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, okay, to mildly rave, not that I want this as a book club book, but just the great final speech by Captain America in Ultimate 6 when he just disses Nick Fury is him like talking about like I don't like at all because the entire time Captain America is just so pissed off and Nick Fury's like, did you make these guys trying to make me? And just Nick Fury's like, yes, Cap. Now please just keep quiet. And just at the end, Nick Fury's like, you know what? This is all your problem, Nick Fury. Like you willed these supervillains into existence, and then you talking about Bush era of just like then you illegally and now Trump of just ICE of just now you illegally imprisoned these people without trial, and now they're out and they're angry at you. This is all your mess, and we're just cleaning it up. But just at the end, just Captain America also being a bit more hard-edged, just like, why don't you just kill these people? Just kill them. What are we going to possibly learn from them? Why are you keeping them alive? And just Nick Fury's like, no, but we got to like study them and like figure out because the next war is going to be a genetic war. It's like, you know what, Nick Fury, you keep saying that, but I found that everyone just says that the wars that we fight, we're trying to prevent something to happen. And you keep saying that the war is going to be a genetic war. I think you're willing that into being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I am definitely looking forward to the Ultimates and the Ultimate X-Men discussion because Ultimate Spider-Man and Ultimate Iron Man are the only Ultimates books that I've read. I've never read a Ultimate X-Men, Ultimates, or Ultimate Fantastic Four book. So it'll be very interesting to see how reading those books for the first time alters my perspective on Ultimate Spider-Man. Real quickly, because the show will be starting here in 2 minutes, Amin asked, how does this compare to the first 6 issues of the current Ultimate Spider-Man? I would say if this Ultimate Spider-Man is like decompressed storytelling, the new Ultimate Spider-Man feels very compressed in comparison, but also like even though supposedly more time takes place during that Spider-Man's like tenure, it feels like this Peter has been Spider-Man longer than the new Ultimate Spider-Man. Viltrum says, to preview Ultimate X-Men and compare to Miller's writing, Ultimate Spider-Man is 7 issues to build up to one superhero fight. They're typing. Amin said Oppenheimer Parker, which, yeah, I absolutely agreed. I said, just read the end of Ultimate X-Men and where it ends. Yeah, I just got the alert that the Comics Pals just started their show, so I'm going to end things here. After the Pals show is over, we are going to do a Bendis spotlight to spotlight their career as a whole, not just their Ultimate stuff. So if you do have time after the Pals show and you want to continue this discussion and more Bendis talk, then I will see you for Post Pals at 2 p.m. EST.